A hyper-intensive horror with no limits. Peace and quiet is a lie. An exaggeration and focus on death, blood, and gore. Here we see the potential of splatterpunk. Trigger warning now, because today we will discuss how to bring this punk genre into your Dungeons & Dragons campaigns and characters. Hello Acolytes, welcome to the Cleric Corner. My name is Riker, and here we talk about all things Dungeons & Dragons, tapping into our higher powers to create worlds more unique and stories more impactful. But first we look at our incredible sponsor for this video, Into the Wilds, a real one-stop shop for all of your battle map needs, including forests and villages, deserts and jungles, mountains and oceans, caves and caverns, dungeons and crypts, and swamps and ruins. A combined total of 180 battle maps, 500 asset stickers, and a digital and VTT versions to boot across 6 books. Explore countless battle-ready maps for both in-person and online play with both pre-decorated versions of the map and ones that you can decorate yourself. I like how creator Tom Cardos put it, these maps will help you inspire your stories and bring your games to life. And look at that face. That's a face you can trust. Back it now before it closes on November 4th. Find it through the affiliate link below in the description. Now let's get back to it. Splatterpunk is meant to make the person experiencing the media squeamish and uncomfortable. While often not as full of jump scares as its other horror counterparts, there is plenty of cannibalism, nymphomaniacs, body mutilation, degradation, erotic grotesqueness, and torture. They can also really lean into certain phobias like arachnophobia, coulrophobia, entomophobia, or ophidiophobia, but will always include lots and lots of gore. Less horror and more horrifying, if that makes sense. And being a punk, that's the subversion. Where other horrors depict a nice town and a nice family, something goes wrong, but after a few scares, order is restored. Splatterpunk is a horror that always was, and even upon discovering it, there is no way to get back to normal, because normal never existed. In a live stream recently, we explored what horror looked like in a cultural art form, but what if we explored the protagonist falling in love with the horror itself? What can horror be apart from scary movies we have come to know? But while it can still include those familiar elements, this is splatterpunk. A political movement, as punk genres often are, mutilations and transformations can reflect the scary transformations of society. Cannibalism can reflect civil aggression, or erotic grotesqueness can reflect other flirtations with questionable ideals. The great thing about splatterpunk is that because it's more of a visual genre, it can be easily tied into other punks as well. To put simply, adding intensive gore to genres like cyberpunk or steampunk would keep the integrity of both themes. So now that we get the gist of what this horror genre is, let's explore more of how to revolve your D&D campaign around it, how to fit splatter-themed characters within it, and other inspiration from other media that you can pull from. But of course, we will be sure to run this by your players before implementing it into your campaign in any capacity in session zeros. When creating your world of D&D, you must decide whether splatterpunk is going to be the world as a whole or only a portion of it that the players may encounter later. Remember that exploring splatterpunk means that you are stretching what horror is, and instead of it being mysterious and suggestive, splatterpunk lays it all out on the table. But the great part is that it literally dares you to how far you can push it. People literally ripping themselves apart for personal aesthetics, love affairs with zombies and alien creatures, constructs made of blood tubes and bone gears, or experimental genetic splicing resulting in abominations, and all that somehow being a good thing. Creatures could be the inside-out versions of themselves, giants literally putting Englishmen between 2 loaves of bread, or the Feywild being more akin to dark Fey, offspring of both demons and Fey. The key to running a campaign like this, though, is largely in your descriptions. When you flay another creature with a sword, or watch someone's ribs being ripped apart while still awake, you as a DM describe that in detail. Again, this genre is not for everyone and should be done with the expectation of challenging your line of uncomfortable. It is your job running this campaign to be as gross as you can, and that can be freeing for some people. As far as living in technology of the splatterpunk setting, again, it can be entirely up to the setting. Living in anything from normal houses to living in the labyrinthine organs of a gigantic aberration. Government can be anything from an AI printing human cyborgs as a population code that never turned off, or a monarchy bent on breeding intestine-ripping werewolves to subjugate their people. If you're playing a regular sword or sorcery game, or a cyberpunk or any genre, just ask yourself, how can this become really gory. If we are talking purely aesthetics of splatterpunk setting, you can look into piercings, stretched skin, and unnecessary body alterations to be a thing of fashion, the clothes of which could still be wet innards of another recently dead creature. Another way of pushing the envelope of horror is making horror an integrated part of their culture. The music, architecture, or even the food reflect a grotesqueness that invites pain and queasiness. Just ask yourself what makes you uncomfortable and then make it part of the status quo. Again, not essential for a gore-fest setting, but one creative option. But speaking of all this flavor, if you want some extra help in developing undead themes for your game, check out my monthly magazine created by me and my wonderful team. Vampire bard subclasses, undead playable character tips, exploration of different kinds of zombies and vampires from across the world. Pick this up and my last month's issue for free on my Patreon, or get it on my website linked below. If you can't support me in that way, just keep liking and commenting my videos, and make sure that you're all subscribed. All of you do so much in helping me make this channel a reality, and I hope that I can keep making videos like this one, but maybe one a little less gory. But let's get back to it. So in order to fit in this bloodbath of a setting, what kind of characters would fit really well? First on the list is obviously the Blood Hunter, a gothic dream of blood magic and pain. Self-harm being one of the uncomfortable elements that you can explore in this setting. Again, only if your players are open to that. And I realize now that this video is either going to be really popular with all you horror lovers out there, or really unpopular with those who think that these topics should be altogether avoided. Trust me, I personally wouldn't go close to most of the extremes that I brought up in this video, but what you do at your table is none of my business and entirely up to you. I'm just the informer. If you do include this aspect, really play up the self-harm and its relevance to the story. But let's look at reflavoring a few other subclasses while we're at it. Be an artificer, armorer, or battlesmith who builds their contraptions from bone, skin, or ichor of beasts or other humanoids. Many barbarians fit the bill with blood rages, but maybe the beast subclass specifically for augmented claws and purposefully sharpened teeth. The Whispers Bard leans heavily into a body-snatching horror where you can literally wear someone else's skin. A Death Domain Cleric that steals the hearts of their enemies and keeps them beating. A Shepherd Druid that spreads the plague of rabies to subjugate their animal thralls. A masochistic Battlemaster Fighter that makes sure to flay their quarry as much as possible before their defeat. A soul-stealing Way of the Long Death Monk, frightening their enemies with a mindlessness of an ascension gone wrong. An Oath of Conquest or Oath of Gory Paladin, decorating themselves with trophies of these that they killed. A Swarmkeeper inflicting rot and pus with the insects that they attack with. A cannibalistic rogue mastermind that tricks their victims into eating your last victim. Show off your exposed brain to unconsented experimentation with the Aberrant Mind Sorcerer, or have gears replace your organs with the Clockwork Soul Sorcerer. Of course, the Warlock being a high contender and the best fit arguably the Undead subclass, taking on a form of dread as a virus inside of you swells your skin and covers you in boils. Or finally, an illusion wizard that paints the world with the enemy's greatest fears and phobias. Now granted, a lot of those subclasses and concepts can lean towards evil, but they don't have to be. This could be the societal norm, where morality is different here. What is acceptable in one place may not be acceptable in another. And with a world full of gore and horror, where else are they supposed to get their magic from? As an added tip, you as the DM can decide to limit subclasses into options more fitting into the setting. If you really feel the Nature Domain Cleric is a little too fanciful to keep the aesthetic, you can let your players know that it isn't an option for this game specifically. Then it gives you an easier time keeping the integrity of the theme you and your players are going for. But of course, I urge you to be creative and seeing what horror elements that can be included. A Nature Cleric with man-eating plants do sound pretty terrifying. The magic itself in a campaign like this might lean a lot into transmutation and necromancy schools, either transforming the flesh or pulling essence from it, but you could also use other schools like enchantment if you're wanting to deal with mind control as a horror element. Picking the right background might also flavor a splatter character. Some good ones in my opinion would be the Faceless, hiding a true identity, or a gladiator if the gore has met the entertainment industry. The Haunted one either being the horror yourself or experiencing one, a sage researching the necrotic energies of life and death itself, or a Simic scientist if Dr. Frankenstein was a childhood idol. If you wanted to pick up some flavorful feats, you could start with the Piercer, Crusher, and Slasher to deal out as much pain as possible, Artificer Initiate for those combining flesh with technology, Chef if you picked up a taste for the humanoids you keep killing. Tough if you have gotten used to the pain you keep inflicting on yourself. Eldritch Adept or Shadow Touched if you're handling the horror side of magic. Gunner because it's nice to have a gun in any horror scenario, of course. Or Weapon Master to get proficiencies in a number of different torture weaponry. As you do prepare for a splatterpunk setting, search for inspiration with the media as well. Movies might include The Descent, Hellraiser, Blood Drive, Midnight Meat Train, Rick and Morty in Hell in the episode Amortican Graffiti, Happy Tree Friends, some episodes of The Twilight Zone, and a tons of Japanese splatterpunk like Tokyo Gore Police and Meatball Machine. From the video games medium, we have Splatterhouse, Mortal Kombat, Dead Space, Golden Light, and Stasis. Books are abound with titles like Splatterpunk's Extreme Horror, Splatterpunk's 2 Over the Edge, Seeing Red, Symbiotic Fascination, The Cipher, many books by the author John Skip, and other hardcore horror books you can find literally all over the place. And some people might say that this genre doesn't fit well with a D&D rule set or aesthetic. I would disagree, but here are other TTRPGs that you can play that might aid well to this type of gameplay or add further inspiration for your D&D game. You have Cult, Death is Only the Beginning, or Nightcrawlers, a splatterpunk role-playing game, or Blood from Postmortem Studios. If you end up implementing splatterpunk in your own games or have other ideas in the setting, please let me know in the comments below. And make sure to explore other punk genres as we go over them in this playlist here. But in the meantime, go out there and spread the good word of D&D and make the world a better place, both on and off the table. See you in the next one.